Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, illustrated by John Klassen. All right. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knitted herself a jumper. When Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knitted a jumper for Mars too, but there was still a little extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went out for a walk, Luke pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Luke. But it turned out he was. She knitted Luke and his dog a sweater. And even after she'd made a jumper for Luke and his dog, and for herself and Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her jumper. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone, Annabelle. That jumper of yours is a terrible distraction I cannot teach with everyone talking and turning to look at you." "I'll knit one for everyone then," said Annabelle, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did. She knitted a sweater for all of her classmates, even for Mr. Norman, and when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knitted jumpers for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Lewis. She made jumpers for everyone except for Mr. Crabtree, who never wore jumpers or even trousers, and who would stand in his shorts in the snow up to his knees. "No jumpers for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabelle still had a little extra yarn. She made jumpers for all of the dogs and all of the cats and all of the other animals too. Soon people thought Annabelle would run out of yarn, but it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made jumpers for things that didn't even wear jumpers. It's kind of funny. Things began to change in that little town. Everything had a jumper or a sweater. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see jumpers, all of the jumpers, and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you £1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a jumper for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." 10 million, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box, and they took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea and back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted the lid and he looked inside. What do you think he found? His mustache quivered. It shivered, it trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." But what happened to the box? It landed on an iceberg and floated. Where do you think it floated? All the way back to Annabelle and her dog. It turned out she was happy again. All right.